Thank you for having me as part of this series on narration and embodiment. I'm Natasha Ginwala. I'm a curator, author, and editor, currently speaking to you from Berlin. Then I also divide my time in Sri Lanka, in Colombo, and I'm going to also speak about one practice that stems from this scene. But first, I'd like to just, in this very brief exchange within a series that has been extremely interesting to watch, I feel it's important to locate myself, particularly when thinking about the question of embodiment, but also of what feels or cites of narration are produced through the performing body. And when I think about this in terms of internalizing a lot of the knowledge that has come from the ground in terms of India and also South Asia at large, the question of performance has always been part of oral and living practices. In a way, moving from the house to spaces of pedagogy, to the marketplace or the bazaar, to festivals, sacred sites, royal courts, but also within circles of the commons, where legends are passed on, where stories are told, where learning takes place, where testimonies are built. So all of these modes of performativity are not codified in the sense that perhaps a Western ontology demands a set of performance to take place within a staged scenario, within a certain kind of time bound a reality. Because a lot of these performances that I'm talking about, these traditions, in fact, are enduring for centuries, and they're constantly improvised. They are passed on for generations. And the learning, therefore, is also taking place unscripted in the sense of unwritten. So scripted in the sense through the body. And that's what I'm really very interested in, also in thinking about contemporary performance methods. So the way that these kinds of performance models actually take you and in a sense also accompany you from the time of birth to the time of death. In the fact that there are certain, for instance, songs that are sung where performers visit the site of a birth. And we know this from various parts of the world, but I just really feel this sense to convey that the stage is not a singular ground. And life, in fact, is that space in which performance occurs, at times on invitation, at times spontaneous, and also the role, in fact, of mourning and lamentation, especially in our times today, is also a deeply informed practice of performance. And so in that sense, even the end of life is not complete without that space of performance being initiated. So that's how I wanted to commence today. The first practice that I'd like to draw from, and I'll go through a few examples today, is the work of Wu Tsang and her collaborators, particularly her long-term collaborator, partner, Boychild. I met Wu a couple of years ago in Bergen, where I also met with Fred Moten and Stefano Harney. And this practice has been extremely inspiring to me. I feel as though I'm learning from it constantly, because together as a sort of band, as they call themselves, they are constantly creating new techniques, new modes of resonance, new modes of study, as Stefano Harney and Fred Moten write. And I'm going to read what they mean by this notion of study. Harney and Moten write, "We were committed to the idea that study is what you do with other people. It's talking and walking around with other people, working, dancing, suffering, some irreducible convergence of all three, held under the name of speculative practice." So in Wu's filmic, sculptural, and live work, there's a reckoning with affective modes of call and response as she crafts movement images that float between the personal and communal, articulating between rhythm and silence, desire and volatility. Moved by the Motion is one such work, which you see an image from here. Another is a work that they realized at the Gropius Bau as part of Wu Tsang's residency, which was also a response to the exhibition of Ana Mendieta, and a reading of Ana Mendieta that came from the scholar Jose Esteban Munoz. So how to convey a practice of performance by giving it a certain kind of afterlife or liveness that is informed by this particular moment, where text kind of comes is sort of enacted through the voice, but also through the imprints that the body makes in spaces. I was recently reading an interview conversation, actually, between Hypatia Volurmes and Sandra Ruiz, also together with Fred Moten and Stefano Harney, which was around Volurmes and Ruiz's book called Formless Formation. And in it, they write, "If resonance is the theory and also the method and movement, then the vignette is the thing that's enacting these very things in its ability to be episodic, to be a moment upon a moment, to be ephemeral, to move, to be both sonically and uncontainable, but heard." And in this way, I'm just sort of taking this as shorthand because this is an expansive practice. But these are just vignettes, actually, that I wanted to kind of bring out when responding to this extremely vibrant and bold practice that is being carried out in our midst. Another practice which I'd like to ponder on for a brief moment is the work of Venuri Perera. And Venuri Perera is an artist, but also choreographer trained in Candian dance initially, and then constantly thinking about methods of retraining the body, of what it also means to be held within a woman's body, and what that frame means, the social frame, the cultural frame. But also through it, really, for her, the role of being an educator and a mentor to younger dancers has been extremely important. She has been part of Columbus Folk Festival on multiple occasions, and she's someone we continue to be in resonance with, in a sense, because we're constantly thinking of the nuances of this particular island reality and landscape of Sri Lanka, its political reality, its history and present of militarism, and what it means for a body to speak within that context. What is the form of embodiment in terms of ritual, which also Venuri draws from, really also thinking as a brown subject. What are the ways in which border crossing and migration can be marked by that body and its conditions of existing within within a bordered reality. On one hand, a certain kind of isolation and distance as part of the southernmost part of South Asia, but then also what it means to take certain kind of methodologies in which also this body is practicing endurance, is retraining and reskilling herself in order to then kind of also think through the space of justice, to think through the terms of, in one way, addressing the dynamic production of race, but then also the ways in which erasure takes place back home, which is another kind of counter-violence of minority existences. Another practice that I've been engaging with quite closely over the years is the work of Nikhil Cophra. And Nikhil Cophra has been an extremely prolific practitioner. He also has not only his own practice, but as an organizer, together with a collective, including his partner, Mati Gore, who's an artist and has been collaborating with him in different moments of performance and also of organizing at HH Art Spaces in Goa, which is quite a vibrant space to invite other kinds of artists and performing bodies. For several years, they've done this work, and through that, again, considered vocabularies of the ways in which the body cites itself and the way that citations from the landscape enter the realm of the living body. A certain work that we've been extremely connected through, a thread that really ties us together, is Nikhil's project for Documenta 14, which is called Drawing a Line Through Landscape. And there's a lot to say about this project, so I would just try to keep it as short as possible. But when he heard about this invitation, and you already see that Nikhil Cophra is in many ways someone who takes on multiple roles in terms of what we would call also the Baharupia, really taking on being able to play without a mask, being actually able to play the many-faced, the many-bodied being. And so he's constantly using role play to also revisit certain kinds of historical and present episodes that have been overlooked or that have been underexplored, and he does so through his own kinds of journeys. So with Documenta, he actually made this road journey with various collaborators from Athens to Kassel, which is over 3,000 kilometers. And through this also worked with various artists, organizers from Bulgaria to Hungary, also really looking at the paradoxical realities of Europe as we know it today, because how else, besides actually placing the body at these various points of connection within the so-called European Union, you realize actually just how many kinds of schisms there are. And so Nikhil traveled with a tent, which he used also as a studio, which he used as a site of community building, of nourishing together, of drawing on the surface of the tent, so it becomes this kind of elaborate canvas or skin, And then he was constantly also changing character, and many of the elements of his costume that were made by Lois Berganza, or the tent, for instance, was made by a set designer and who's worked in several films, Aradhana Sheikh. So these were the kind of ways in which various people entered the project, and the elements were very, very selectively sort of chosen through extensive research in various informal markets, etc., through looking at the kind of the sort of traditional and nomadic kinds of populations who have been part of the kind of migrating geography of this sphere, or this route for so many decades, and so through that also connecting very much, at least in Athens, to the sea, to the Greek landscape. The performance started at an old taverna really close to Piraeus port. So really also thinking about the kind of loss of lives that is taking place, plummeting through in these waters, and the violent nature of that. And through that, then breaking out, breaking forward, and creating this differential sort of imagination of what it means to be a traveling subject. There's another image also from this performance. So one is where it began in Athens, and also really for Nikhil to choose this medium of mud, which is again the most primary form. So really a gestural approach to creating the horizon, much of it informed by the body's capacity for labor, and then of exhausting oneself fully, in which case then the performer comes to a standstill. So these are also ways of narrating. And in the end, you see in this railway station, which was kind of had been abandoned and not used, the performer sort of enters at the end in castle into this space, which is a kind of ruin, and stretches out the entire tent, which is this kind of elaborate line through the landscape, connecting up this broken landscape that we pretend is a union. The last part, and this will be again quite a shift actually, but it's a practice that I've been working with together with Daphne Ayas, artistic director, with myself, of the 13th Gwangju Biennial, Minds Rising, Spirits Tuning. Together with our incredible team, including producer Davide Quadrio, we worked on a procession, which was the idea behind which was to really think about the way that a biennial exhibition can be animated, what it means to wake up or awaken a set of works, and kind of also have this this sort of field in which the bodies of trained and untrained bodies, dancers, choreographers, traditional Korean drummers, kids doing martial arts form, taekyon, are all held together through the fractal choreography of 8OS, which also stands for open source body mind operating system, and this idea of confluence, of continuum, this symbol as we know it of infinity, and yet one that is structured very much through networks between the body and the machine, the ways in which the body mind operates beyond the limits of our knowledge. What does it mean to actually create these constellations, which are on one hand mapped algorithmically, digitally, but also then going back very much to the kinds of strategies of resilience and vulnerability in which our bodily histories are then brought alive and contest the spaces that they inhabit. So we'll maybe not go too much into detail, but the kind of kinetic aesthetics, the sort of ways in which AOS practices in relation with this set of performers who they met for a very brief time, actually, in South Korea. They had hardly any time together, but to create this piece during a pandemic was just, it brought up a lot of a surge of emotions, but a surge of bodily intelligence that we felt completely altered the kind of exhibition as an energy field. So we're going to play a short excerpt from the procession for you, and that will also serve as the conclusion.
On the same lands where you used to struggle, we are still struggling to make sure that we can live on our lands. Sama palkan mihtai, kus nüüd algne pruukivaid säid. Talikili abiel, lefas sama tahte paista. Sama šaljunalni, kus nüüd algne piiasrit talikili luodja, lekotame taite siia ästa. Sama etnamisni, kus nüüd algne pruukiratšet, Tallinni ratšipie, vai viesut mien lantana. Lantana.